So excited today for our What Works showcase, connecting programmatic results to collective impact in Chicago with AJ Watson, the National Director of BAM, and also Chris Goins, the Chief Equity Officer of Thrive Chicago. Really excited about this conversation, and we have our colleague Jaime on the line, who leads our work on the MBK end in Chicago. I would like to pass it over to you, Jaime, for a quick introduction of the discussion and also brief introductions of AJ and Chris as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to again, I'm really excited to have everyone learn a little bit about what we've been doing in Chicago. I think there's a lot to really highlight and a lot that folks can learn from. Chicago was one of the first cities that signed on to the President's My Brother's Keeper Challenge back in 2014. The work had been really well resourced, I would say, on the programmatic side, but I think the part that Chicago hadn't yet put together was really a table that was active and really focused on how to create some of those systemic connections across the different nonprofit organization systems, et cetera, across the city. I think I'm really excited about the work that Thrive Chicago has done under Chris's leadership to do that. AJ has really been a part of our table from the very, very beginning, including the first My Brother's Keeper cabinet that was appointed about 3 years ago, and we've really kept him as a consistent source. I think you're going to learn a lot from them about what they've been doing over the past several months, but also how we've really taken a My Brother's Keeper table that, frankly, a couple of years ago was kind of dormant. And really created a really vibrant table that is growing and exciting, and really, really excited about the work that Chicago's doing under Chris and AJ's leadership. So I will turn it over to them. Chris Goins is the Chief Equity Officer at Thrive Chicago, and AJ Watson is the National Director of the Becoming a Man program at Youth Guidance. I'll let them tell you a little bit about what they're doing, but they're just phenomenal leaders in our city, and we're really excited to have them.
Hi, everyone. We look forward to digging in and hopefully sharing a little bit of wisdom. We have very limited wisdom, but a little bit. Let's tap into the ancestors. We got a little bit. Yeah, we got a little bit. Pull up the presentation. Yeah. So just so folks know, we got a slide deck that we are going to pull up and share and walk through. But the real intention is to get through that slide deck and then to really open the conversation up for just dialogue. So bear with us as we get back to our top slide. And if you are not able to see, so we will lose some of the visual of seeing everybody, but just wanted to hopefully give you some visuals as we walk through kind of narrate. So, absolutely. So we'll jump right in and just kind of giving introductions into each one of us. My name is Chris Goins. I come to this work as a founding high school principal in Chicago. I founded through the Noble Network of Charter Schools. I founded Butler College Prep. And the way I decided to kind of introduce how I show up to this work as the impact community leader for My Brother's Keeper in Chicago is to kind of highlight, if you Googled Butler College Prep, this is what you will find. And if you just take a minute and look at it, you can tell what type of students we serve. We are in the far south side of Chicago. And 6 years ago, we approached this work, me and my founding team. We wanted to really create a different narrative for Black students in Chicago. We all know what the backdrop in Chicago, the violence in Chicago, and the narrative around young people in Chicago, especially Black and brown students. And so we wanted to create a school that centered around creating and defining a different narrative for kids. So if you were to Google Butler, these are some of the pictures that you will see. You see Black kids that are thriving, that are excited about learning, that are winning championships, that are actually doing martial arts. You also will see pictures of young men who are actually who are exploring the field of education. We created a dedicated class for young men at Butler who were seniors, and our goal was to push them to college to major in education. And we piloted it in 1 year, and we had 20 young men and 11 of those young men are now in college as freshmen, majoring in education. I'm sorry?
Keep going.
Oh, sorry.
Echo, but
Okay.
this is fascinating, by the way. I want my son to go there, but thank you for sharing.
Yay. So I approached this work at Butler to create a different narrative, and that's what attracted me to My Brother's Keeper when this role came about, and Chicago had identified Thrive Chicago as the place that would carry out the action plan, and how can we take the lessons learned at Butler and create a new narrative for boys and young men of color in the city of Chicago, and that's how I show up to this work. Awesome. So again, my name is AJ Watson. I serve as the National Director for Youth Guidance is Becoming a Man program. The pictures here are a little bit more self-aggrandizing, if you will. But the idea here is, for me, when I was at the University of Michigan, I was getting my MBA and trying to figure out what to do. Well, how do I want to bring my skills and talents to the next chapter of my life? And it was a consulting project that I had during my first year that took me down to the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. So rural Latino education, working with Idea Public Schools. And I walked into the CEO's office and I saw business models like Good to Great and 7 Habits all strewn about his office. And it just blew my mind. I had never thought about bringing my business orientation expertise into a for-purpose type of role. And that's what ultimately led me, as much as I learned a ton, and really the work that organization is doing in that community, right, is transformational. I'm just more connected to my roots back from Detroit, growing up here in the upper Midwest, across Michigan and Minnesota. And as a graduate of Howard University, wanted to come back and either going to be Detroit or Chicago. And so I was looking for a job. Chicago won. And that has led me to come and really, for the last 5.5 years, sit in the chair as a director and now national director of BAM. And just earlier this year, as much as we'll get into the story of the history of BAM and President Obama in Chicago, had never had a chance to really be right up close and personal with our former president. And at MBK Rising had a chance to just update him on the growth and the progress that had been going on with BAM since he had last come and joined us in 2014. And so it's just a great moment, and that's what's reflected here on the slide. Great. That was a guerrilla photo. I wasn't supposed to take that photo. But yeah. So a little bit about Thrive Chicago. I want to introduce what Thrive Chicago is, and then we will revisit Thrive later in the presentation. But our mission states that we create collaborative networks of people and data that accelerate innovation for Chicago's youth. And just want to walk you through what we're driven by at Thrive. We believe in community-led solutions. There are very few solutions that come up through Thrive that are driven by a funder specifically or driven by an individual. It's all community-led solutions. We do believe we have that activist mindset, and we have a disruptive belief in being better. And we definitely value the gift of perspective and strongly believe that there is potential in innovative thinking, and we have a true fight for equity, and that's what I obsess over in our organization as a chief equity officer in Thrive. And so I want to present this now, and then I'm going to walk everyone through an example of how we use our collaborative management capabilities. This is our model here, and then, like I said, later on I'll walk you through one. But how we do what we do, we convene and connect groups and action teams. Then we activate data and research. And with that group, we also co-design solutions. Then we move to pilot, prove, and improve these solutions. And then we actually source collaboratively, I'm messing that word up. We actually source innovation funding and find sources to continue to fund this particular work. And once again, like I said, I will walk us through an example of that. And this just demonstrates why Thrive was a good partner for the Obama Foundation and this My Brother's Keeper Alliance with Youth Guidance because of our capabilities there. And then just quickly in terms of youth guidance, and we'll talk a little bit about BAM just to make sure folks are grounded in the programmatic side of the work, is that youth guidance as an organization has been around since 1924. So we're about 95 years old, and our entire orientation is to create and implement school-based programs that ultimately help young people overcome obstacles, focus on education, and succeed in school and life. And we're really grounded in a set of core values around our belief in the potential of all kids, being holistic as possible in our approach, meeting kids where they are both physically and emotionally without judgment as much as possible. We believe that relationships matter and that being our best is an ongoing process. And that's really the context of the organization that really allowed a program like BAM to grow up and to come to scale. So we thought, for purposes of this conversation today, we would just do a little bit of grounding in the Chicago part of the MBK story. Many folks know, right, the story that is often told publicly around President Obama and his connection to the death of Trayvon Martin, and how personally that connected with him, and how he chose to really personalize, right, the death of Trayvon Martin as that potentially being him. And that happened right shortly before he launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative in the East Room of the White House back in 2014. What folks may not know is that there's a little bit of a Chicago backstory as well. So shortly after, during President Obama's second inauguration, of course, during the inaugural parade, there was lots of folks from Chicago who came and performed, but in one of those groups was a young woman named Heidi Pendleton. And unfortunately, shortly after returning from performing in the President Obama's second inaugural parade, she was shot and killed here on the south side of Chicago. And of course, there was a lot of desire for the president and first lady to come back to Chicago and talk about what that meant, help us grieve. And so in February of 2012, February of 2013, President Obama did come back to Chicago to actually address and talk to Chicago. And he actually came to one of his local, the high school in his local community, which was Hyde Park Academy. At the time, Youth Guidance happened to be running a BAM program at that school, and we had just released some results from some of the research we've been doing on the program. And so the president, at the urging of our mayor at the time, who was his former chief of staff, was gracious enough to say he'll come and spend 20 minutes in a BAM circle. But what ended up happening is when he got into that circle, he was so connected to the young men, to the conversation that was happening that day, he stayed for an hour. And the connection with those young men continued such that he invited those young men to the White House for Father's Day. And the young men you see in this picture, right, when he introduced the My Brother's Keeper initiative, had Kristen Champagne from that same circle introduce him and lifted up BAM as kind of a model program into this work. And the only thing I say is, it's the authenticity and the honesty of him just being another man in the circle and sharing his story. And the young men could not believe that his story, they thought it was theirs. And just that the circumstances was more forgiving where he grew up as opposed to where many of our young men. And that has really has been one of the kind of through lines into the MBK work when it was in the White House, as it grew to the MBK Alliance, and now as a part of the Obama Foundation. So what we'll quickly do is I just want to kind of update you in terms of, so since the president came in 2014, BAM a lot has been happening. There's been a ton of growth and expansion, and has been very much connected to the growth and expansion of My Brother's Keeper. So this year we are going to be serving approximately 8,500 students across 4 different geographies. Almost 7,500 here in Chicago, 550 in across 10 schools in Boston, and then 275 in LA and King County, Washington. And this is incredibly heartening for us, but the question becomes like, okay, so what is BAM and why is it something that is growing and is having this kind of impact across the country? So what I want to do is just walk you through very quickly just a bit about BAM and our program model, and then we'll get into the Thrive and Thrive Youth Guidance journey together. So very simply, I describe BAM as a male-to-male counseling and mentoring program, right, school-based, and its goal is to improve psychological well-being, relationship with social communication, foster school engagement, right, and reduce, right, some of those negative behaviors and aggressive behaviors that also unfortunately shows up many times for our young men. You know, we know the program is being targeted towards a particular population of young men in schools, those who are behind academically, struggling behaviorally, right, or feeling isolated socially. And we create and run BAM circles where each BAM counselor works with about 55 young men, divides them into small groups of about 12 to 15 that meet once a week with their BAM counselor over the course of a 2-year period. Those groups are incredibly safe, authentic spaces where young men can show up just truly as they are, right? Being vulnerable, being open and honest, but knowing and getting that they're not alone and getting support. The counselors that run the programs, that run the groups, are they are men of color. About 85% of our staff are men of color, often coming with backgrounds in social work, psychology, counseling. But most importantly, they are dynamic when it comes to engaging young men and open to doing their own, what we call ruthless self-examination. They take a hard look at what it means for them and their own journey to manhood so that they can model that same authenticity and vulnerability for the young men in their circles. And then we run a values-based curriculum that really is grounded in our 6 core values of integrity, accountability, self-determination, positive anger expression, respect for womanhood, and visionary goal setting. And it's really these core values that really the whole program hangs together around. And the one value I like to always highlight very quickly is just positive anger expression. Normally I ask a question by show of hands, who's heard of anger management? Most hands go up. I ask, how many of you have heard of happiness management? No one hands goes up. And so why is it that anger has to be managed and happiness gets to run around all willy-nilly? When the reality is that the extremes of anger or the extremes of happiness, ask any city that's won a championship, not Chicago in the last couple of years, but maybe Seattle or LA or somebody. And you can find out, right, that extreme happiness can be destructive, right, just like extreme anger. And so we just reframe this idea of anger from being this negative emotion that needs to be managed to just natural energy that needs to be expressed in a productive way. We frame it around whether you're a warrior and in managing your energy or channeling it for a just cause, or showing up with savage energy and just, right, showing up acting crazy just cause. And so when we do that work well, we've been able to evaluate the program and know that it is connected to 3 critical outcomes that our school partners care about, and that is critical for our young men. First for us is that, right, it improves all young men staying on track in terms of progressing through school, which leads to improved graduation rates by about 19% versus, right, young men not in the program. We know when they do that work in school, it translates into the neighborhood and community in terms of young men, right, getting arrested by about by a third less, and for violent crime in particular by 50% less. And then we know it's a super cost-effective intervention because of the group model, because of its impact on violence, but more importantly, we see massive impacts in growth on social emotional in terms of how young men are showing up as just healthy, whole, and frankly happy, as you can see in the picture, right, young men. And so really that for BAM, that's really the core of our model. And I just want to make sure I spend just a couple minutes, because when we think about the partnership between Thrive and Youth Guidance and the Impact Grant, there's 2 aspects. One of it, which is expanding programmatic work here in Chicago, and the fund that we received from the Obama Foundation that helped us to really grow into the South Shore community, which we were not able to work with prior to. And we're really having a great set of programming in one of our high schools and the 4 feeder elementary/middle schools that go together. And so BAM and Youth Guidance is really excited to continue to do the work of BAM and grow our programmatic work. But more importantly, recognizing, like, you know, we're one organization, we do not have the perspective and the landscape that Thrive Chicago has. And so who can we partner with that really has that, is a convener of tables, right, that understands how to really bring people together, come up with solutions and co-design them. And I think that's really what the Obama Foundation saw in connecting, really giving Thrive the mantle of helping with the action plan and with the table. Yeah, and I want to just drill down on the point that AJ described and what happens in the BAM circles. Research has proven, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit, around that purpose-driven space for boys and young men of color. Additionally, Thrive has convened and connected a lot of individuals around post-secondary success for boys and young men of color as well. And so that was something, that's an area right there where we support youth guidance and BAM in helping to support their work with post-secondary success when these young people go off to college. So switching gears a little bit around Thrive, and I wanted to provide you all with an example of some of the work that we've done using our collaborative model. And just so here's some quick data points in our intended results. That in Chicago in 2016, there were nearly 60,000 youth ages 16 to 24 who were disconnected from either school or work, and this is what we call Chicago's Opportunity Youth. And we have set a goal that by 2024, we will reconnect half of this population and drive the number down to 30,000 by 2024. And so that's what we want to center this example that I'm going to provide on. So when we think about these Opportunity Youth in Chicago and how we convened and connected, these are all of the organizations that Thrive convened, connected, would bring together. They would be monthly meetings with all of these individuals at the table to discuss specifically the needs of Opportunity Youth in Chicago. And we do not believe that convening individuals without all of these different entities, without these different organizations, it's just not going to be successful. So you see youth, you see government and city, neighbors and communities, research entities, philanthropy, and then the nonprofit community. So the next step in our business model is that we want to activate data and research that we can respond to and co-design potential solutions. So Thrive, one of our greatest accolades that we're really proud of in leading this convening is that in 2016, we did some data, we did some research with our partners and uncovered some things that really surprised the city of Chicago. So I'll walk you through those. So the current state in Chicago, we have 80% of our youth, Opportunity Youth in Chicago, are actually ages 20 to 24. Prior to this research and this data that was provided in 2016, most of the city thought that Opportunity Youth were teenagers. And so it helped us to identify that there are some gaps there, that the majority of public funding prior to this data was resourcing programming for people that are kids, young people that are 16 to 19. And that's a gap that we were not addressing. Another example of what came out of 2016 was that 49% of Chicago's Opportunity Youth are actually women. A gap there, though, is that organizations were only serving 36% of their Opportunity Youth that are women. There's a gap there. Like, we've proven that there's 49% that are Opportunity Youth that are women, but the city only serving 36%. And the last piece was that 72% of Opportunity Youth actually have a high school diploma. We thought it was much less. But we have a gap where organizations in Chicago were reporting that 89% of Opportunity Youth did not have a high school diploma. And this is just an example of how we activated some data and that we can really pinpoint the strategies and the solutions that the working groups and the convening would address. And so with the Opportunity Youth in our working groups and with the data that we had, this is kind of a model what demonstrates the steps that we took in order to develop a solution. So we build a data, number one says we build a data infrastructure to better understand the needs and trends of Opportunity Youth. That's what I just walked you through. Number two is that we launch community-based reconnection hubs for Opportunity Youth to better navigate existing resources from one centralized location. And the rest of it, I'm not going to walk through. I wanted to focus there on number two because that was the solution that came up from the group, from our convening, and we launched actual reconnection hub, and we actually have two within the city that Thrive actually funds and supports. And so the Reconnection Hub is dedicated to serving opportunity youth here in the city of Chicago, and considering all that data. But what you see in a Reconnection Hub, you have all of these entities housed in one location, serving opportunity youth. So opportunity youth can walk in here and get an assessment and receive transportation services, mental health services, occupational skills training, education services. If you need to complete a GED or you're launching, you're trying to navigate your way through college, childcare, employment services, and then substance abuse counseling. And this is just one example of how we walk through our business model to come up with a solution. And so we're actually applying the same model to the My Brother's Keeper action plan. So before I started at Thrive, AJ, Jaime, and my team at Thrive had already started the convening for My Brother's Keeper to develop this action plan. So they looked at data, activated research to come up with the plan that we are using now as an action team that I'm responsible for leading is implementing this plan. We use, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. But what's interesting about this plan that was developed is that it is reflective of the voices of about 200 boys and young men of color in the city of Chicago who informed what this strategy will be and who informed this action plan. And my responsibility as the impact community leader is to build strategy and activate an action team to address these. And we're now in the process of co-designing solutions for My Brother's Keeper. And AJ is at the table with me. AJ is my partner in crime and not crime. And collaboration.
Uh,
In collaboration. My partner in collaboration. He has walked through this every step of the way with me, and as well as Jaime. So can I just, so one of the things I just love about this plan, right? I mean, as I know each geography, right, has worked on an action plan, and we looked at, right, a lot of those action plans as well from other geographies as for inspiration, but then also we're really focused on that if the voices of our young men of color in this city, right, were not, if they read this and it didn't resonate with them, then we needed this plan to be different than the other documents that have been published and created here in Chicago but still sit on shelves. Mm-hmm. This needed to really bring their voices to life. So I love, like, finding number 4, right? We will no longer use a label at risk and turn away youth looking for help. That is directly from the mouths and what young men of color were telling us. That label itself, right, is insidious and is hurtful and isn't representative of their full narrative. And so number 5 is also about, we're going to celebrate young men of color, right, in the media and public spaces and address the narrative that's going on in the city. So, we could talk about this particular page, and Chris basically lives this every single day. But just this is a plan that we were really proud of, and it was, of course, Thrive Chicago convening the table, Youth Guidance, right, as the co-impact grantee. We also had our 4 seed grantees in Chicago represented from those organizations at the table as well. So really trying to represent a really broad cross-section of young men of color across the city. Yeah, and I want to drill down on another point. I mentioned as being a principal of Butler, we did a lot of deliberate work helping boys and young men of color discover their purpose. And I was sold on joining the team at Thrive when I was able to see this action plan and see that purpose-driven things in school. If you look at finding number 3, we will create in-school classes devoted to helping boys and young men of color find and pursue their purpose in life. And that's essentially what BAM is doing as well. And I appreciate that this is centered here. And so I want to give you all an overview of some of the things that as the Chief Equity Officer and Impact Community Leader for My Brother's Keeper, what I am committing to and what Thrive is committing to, and how we and what the action team is committing to. We are beginning to work on this strategy. So also I want to say that we've only had 2 action team meetings early, so it's very, very early. I started this role in June, so our third action team meeting is actually next week. So to walk you through this, My Brother's Keeper Chicago Thrive team will take the oath and commit to 3 action areas. And so these are Thrive Chicago's, our 2020 commitments and what we're talking about. So we have this statement here: healing soul, body, and mind, empowering Black identity, revolutionizing systems of oppression, and opening paths to opportunity. And if you notice this statement here, the bolded letters spell out hero. And part of the strategy is to activate everyday heroes in the lives of boys and young men of color. How are we going to do that? If we look at this first box on the left of your screen, you folks here? Okay. We want to activate. We've discovered with our partnership with CPS and having the Chief Equity Officer of Chicago Public Schools at the table with us, that there are approximately 1,800 Black male educators in Chicago Public Schools. And we want to activate them to be hero mentors for boys and young men of color. What does that look like? We want to actually offer professional development, policy making, and community building amongst these individuals, so they can take these things back into their individual schools. And so if you think about a teacher, one teacher on average may deal with either between 100 and 150 kids, touch 100 and 150 kids per year. If we're able to activate all those Black male educators within Chicago Public Schools, think about the lives that we can touch, and we can expand that purpose-driven work that BAM was doing and that Butler College Prep is doing. The next section is develop a school or community-based class workshop series led by hero mentors devoted to helping boys and young men of color find and pursue their purpose in life as mentors. So this is where we're thinking about the first point that I made was talking about educators within the school building. This one is how do we activate our individuals in the community to build deliberate classes or activities focused on boys and young men of color, that out of school time. So similar model, we want to do professional development, policy making, and community building, and then think about the things that we want to measure with that. And then the last piece is probably my favorite, is celebrating boys and young men of color and hero mentors in public spaces and challenging negative media stereotypes. This is a strategy that was uplifted at our first action team convening back in October, where the action team is a strong desire for us to do something to change the narrative, and not putting out just stories about or billboards, but what can we do to really be deliberate in changing the narrative around boys and young men of color? And we know that would be a large campaign. So a part of the work that I'm doing is trying to find that partner organization. There are organizations and groups of people that actually do narrative shifting campaigns. And I'm very privy to what's happening with the upcoming movie Just Mercy. Just Mercy actually is attached with an organization that is actually doing a campaign to shift the narrative around the justice system and the death penalty. And how can we do that in Chicago for boys and young men of color? Uplifting BAM, uplifting all of these other organizations that are doing incredible things. And so that's just a snapshot of what strategy we're working on and how we're addressing our things in Chicago. And that's pretty much our information that we have to share, and would love to entertain any questions or comments or just open it up for dialogue.
I'll go ahead and unmute everyone. I'm gonna mute the person. Oh, sorry, Doris. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute everybody. But before I do so, AJ and Chris are so helpful. Makia had a question that I don't want to be sure. Makia, do you want to verbally ask it? Go ahead.
Thanks. There was the slide where you were showing the graphics, and one of them had talked about the return on investment, and so like for every dollar spent, there's $30 saved or however. What did you use to calculate that figure?
Yeah, so that figure came directly from our external evaluation with the University of Chicago. And so the folks who actually led our evaluation work actually have an economist orientation and background, in addition to focusing on crime and issues of that. That's kind of the lab that was working on it. And so that was really the calculation that they did. And they really looked at the cost of a violent crime is incredibly high in terms of the cost for arrest, the cost to the victim, and the cost to the individual, right, that ultimately committed the crime. And so if you can just reduce, right, violent crime by 10% or 15% or 25%, and in this case, 50%, right, it is a massive cost savings to the city, right, to the community. And often, and the other part that doesn't get calculated is the cost that normally, right, so many things that are happening, right, in our neighborhoods and communities, you end up with the cost of 2 young lives, what we find so much, right? The young person who pulled the trigger or, right, who committed the crime, and the person who was the victim, and how both of those families and communities, right, are, almost forever impacted and changed. And so anything we can do to interrupt, right, to disrupt and help young men think differently, to slow down, have a little bit more, many guys, they just navigate spaces differently and end up, not being in the same places they might have been when things were going on, right? A lot of the violence or crime that occurs is not premeditated, right? It is happening as a result of an altercation that rapidly escalates, and then access to a lethal weapon or to lethality, right, changes it from being, a fist fight into being somebody, right, losing a life. So,
yeah, I think it's important for us to be able to do that in our different communities, to be able to put it in that way. I think, because a lot of times when we're talking about our work, sometimes it's appealing to emotion, and there's some people who don't want to hear it. But when you put it into, the money figures, I think that can appeal to a larger crowd as well to help support the work. So thanks for putting that up there.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone. It's going to get a little noisy, AJ and Chris. So I'm going to unmute and then sort of mute people back on. But if you have an immediate question and we can see you, feel free to add it to that Google chat. Otherwise, I'm going to unmute so everybody can sort of ask a question that they might have.
And it's similar to what you want.
All right, so I just unmuted everybody. So it's going to get a little noisy, so I'm just asking for folks to be respectful. But the floor is open for folks who may have a question, and then I'll mute us again so that folks can respond so that there's no background noise.
Commissioner Mary Alice Adams, City of Benton Harbor.
Commissioner, It's so good to hear your voice, and congratulations on the success of your recent convening.
And thank you all for making what did happen. I really appreciate you. My question is, I want the site that leads me to all the slides and past conversations that we've had would be very helpful.
Yes, so Commissioner Jared Brown, I've not spoken to you, but some of our colleagues in our MBK network have wanted to sort of have one place where all the slides and recording from previous communities of learning and practice existed. We can make that happen. Jared and I will come together to do that, Commissioner. But thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner, do you have a question for AJ or Chris about their phenomenal work in Chicago?
I'm listening, and I just want to replicate what's working. That's why I want those slides and this conversation. I came in late, but I just got finished working.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Another question? Sandra?
Yes.
The birthday girl, did you all know it was Sandra's birthday? Sandra, happy birthday.
Right.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm taking all the birthdays. You can send the birthday cards and monies to Sandra Point Simon. But my question is, the slides, thank you for those slides. They were excellent, and I'm hoping that we're getting the copy, as Cecilia has already stated that we will be. But how do you get that number of counselors? Are you paying them, or are they volunteering as part of your program?
Yeah, for us, our counselors are full-time paid staff.
Whoa.
And so it is a big investment into the folks, but I think our fundamental belief is that this work is serious, right? This work really does deserve the professionalism and the professional training that goes into it. And again, right, the salary isn't amazing, right? We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. We're talking probably less than 50K, kind of starting out. But we want folks to be able to do this work full time. And so those staff, we've got, I think at this point, we've got 135 counselors here in Chicago. We've got 10 in Boston, another 5 in LA and Seattle each. And that, of course, has been surrounded by a series of about 30 coaches and trainers who do all the training, who do on-site coaching. Really, and so we could not do that without the significant investment we've been able to, get from directly from Chicago Public Schools, from the City of Chicago, and from our friends and partners in philanthropy, including the folks at the Obama Foundation. But the evidence is really what has allowed to unlock, right? Like that was not always the case for us to be able to make those kind of investments to kind of do that at scale. The evidence has really helped us unlock sources of funding that we may have never had access to. And I think that's part of the work of the Obama Foundation, where it's also to help us amplify and, find bright spots about what's working, but also help us partner with researchers and evaluators to, as Black God was saying, how do we help quantify, right, the impact of our work? And I think that's also what Thrive is doing, is helping to tell a different story and bring the data together to help quantify what might be the size of the challenge, right, or the opportunity for us to really think differently.
So once you guys got involved with them, did school districts work with you collaboratively, or was it just the foundations that came in and then the schools came up after that?
Yeah, normally, as we launched the new geographies, it's so, public funding is difficult to get access to. And until you're doing work in a local community, the idea of getting public funding is at least for us, has been pretty unlikely. And so philanthropy has really showed up well and led and allowed us to kind of do the seed funding for year 1 or year 0 and year 1. And then, but we've only entered geographies where we've been able to get the local partners to come together and say, we're willing to find a path and commit to some level of public funding, right, over the course of 1, 2, 3 years. Brian, I think you had a question, right?
Yeah, I had a, go ahead.
Sorry, Jermaine. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with organizations that do similar work? What's your relationship with them?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of that is, it's great in terms of the table that's being convened here by Thrive, is that, we're seeing all of our friends and partners that we've worked with. Youth Guidance as an organization, right, has been around for 95 years, right, working in schools and in communities, right, not that entire time, but probably the last 50 years. And so we know, whether it's in Chicago, folks like Metropolitan Family Services, SGA, Black Star, right, community-based organizations as well. We work alongside, right? We know we play one piece, but we're gonna do our work in schools, but we need great college access partners. We need great referral partners who are doing, right, the middle school and elementary school work. We need folks who are working around, really the whole sector. And I think that's where Thrive does great work. And convening, you saw all those organizations on that list. Those are all, most of us are friendly with each other, right? And know each other's work pretty well.
And along those lines, like with that convening, all of our organizations have resources somewhere. And how powerful it is when all of these organizations come together and bring, do certain things with their own resources under one goal, under the goal of My Brother's Keeper. And that's what we're able to build as well, and helping our team make commitments to what they're going to do in their respective organizations.
The one other thing that I'll add, and this is Jaime in Chicago at the Obama Foundation, is that the My Brother's Keeper table has reach horizontally, so across the city, frontline folks that are doing the work with young people. We have folks that are leading organizations that are doing violence interruption, and then we also have vertical, leadership as well. So we have folks that are leading systems. So we have the Chief Equity Officer of the Chicago Public School System. We have the First Deputy Commissioner at the city's Department of Family and Support Services. We have an Executive Vice Chancellor at the City College System. So we have really strong systems leadership in addition to the frontline leadership, and that's a lot of really rich conversation and connections that happen from those meetings.
Okay, and just one more, Brian, just one more, and that is Heidi's on here with us also, is that we're looking at expanding our influence, because we have Greece is part of Rochester, but it's not part of the Rochester City School District, and we have charter schools that are asking us if they can come in and be a part of this, and then both female, Hispanic, as well as schools outside of the Rochester preliminary. So are you bringing in all of them part of your project? And if so, how are you doing that?
Yes, they are at the table. We have charter school partners, public school partners. And how did I do it? Maybe because I'm from the charter school world, but I just believe that Black and brown kids deserve a great education wherever that is. And I've always led with that, so I was able to, it's no strife, it's no stress and strife. I mean, we were meeting during a teacher strike. Our last convening was in the middle of the strike, and we had no problems, and CPS's Chief Equity Officer stood up and gave an address to the group, and we all hugging afterwards. So it's just, that's how we approach it, really authentically.
One thing I might add is one, like the table is, and it's not only, but it is also disproportionately, right, young men of color who are in different roles across organizations. So I think one of the also learnings from our earlier table was, let's also center the people who are at the table as those who are also, really passionate and proud about this work, but they are living this work every single day, connected to the young people in the communities that we're trying to impact. So, trying to shrink the distance between what's happening on the ground and who's at the table discussing, right, the solutions.
Brian had a question. Brian, turning the floor over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question about the reconnection hubs. I think those are so cool. I'm just kind of curious, like the structure of it, because is it under like one entity, or do you have like all these different agencies come in and do their separate stuff, or how does that work? And basically, how is that funded as well?
Yeah, so it's funded through the philanthropy community, just a dedicated funder, a combination of funders, but primarily the McCormick Foundation is our main funder for the Reconnection Hubs. And one of the framework for the Reconnection Hub is that this is not a place where the service providers that are located in this Reconnection Hub, it's not just come and go. No, you have a set office in that Reconnection Hub, so that young people and the opportunity youth that are coming into that hub are connecting directly with those individuals. That's where their office is. Similar to how BAM has counselors assigned to a specific school. That's their school. They're a part of that school's community. That's the model of the Reconnection Hub.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a few additional questions in the chat box. Jared, do you want to read them out? Do you want me to?
Sorry. Yeah, I see that we have Mafia.
I can take Black Elf's question.
Okay.
Your question is that, do we know if CPS has a recruitment program that targets Black male teachers? Are they coming from Chicago or out of town? I don't know exactly where Chicago's teachers are coming from, but Chicago Public Schools currently does not have a formal recruitment program targeted for Black male teachers, but I am sitting at the table with that Office of Talent to help develop this initiative based on the lessons that I learned at Butler and what we were able to incorporate at Butler College Prep. The challenge with something like this is that everyone wants to talk about the 2% crisis of male teachers of color in the classroom, but it's difficult to get into someone to fund that type of work. And there's so many innovative things that could happen. But we're having those conversations, and they're at an elevated level. And the state superintendent of education, who happens to be a woman of color in Illinois, she's at that table, and so that's exciting. So nothing right now, but it's coming.
And I also say, I think it's also a big piece for us. Go ahead, Jaime.
No, please go ahead.
So I was going to say,
go ahead. Go ahead.
In the field of social work, right, psychology and counseling, it is disproportionately female and white. And so finding men of color, right, to do this more therapeutic and social work and counseling work is not easy. What we really do is we rely on our existing base of staff to understand the work, to really be our main referral source. But a vision for us down the road is that we're somehow, partnering and kind of, I'll use the term, a little business background, right, backwards integrating into schools of education and schools of social work to try and actually make the field more appealing to men of color.
Absolutely.
That this is a great place for them. They can earn a good living, and they can do work that is incredibly fulfilling and rewarding, and just kind of reframing what it means to be, right, a male of color in the field of social work or psychology or counseling.
Thank you. Thanks for answering the question.
Yeah, the one other thing that I'll add is that the institutions of higher ed have to be really key partners in this whole piece of it, and that's the part that we can talk about the pipeline all we want, but if institutions of higher ed are not producing teachers that are of color that want to teach in urban settings, we're not going to be able to solve that problem, right? I think that the things that Chris did at his school that are bottoms up, and the things that CPS is trying to do, not specifically for men of color, but I think the things that they're doing around focusing, like all those things are good and necessary, but I think institutions of higher ed need to be a key partner, and that's one that I'd love for someone to figure out how to put more pressure on them to be able to do that.
We have time for 2 more questions, so we're leaving the floor back if you have questions again for Chris or AJ.
I just have one question. Will we be able to have you guys' contact info in case we have questions to email you or anything?
Yep, by all means.
All right, thanks.
They're also both on the MBK Slack channel. Just a quick plug there for Slack.
All right, thank you.
I just heard the sound too. I heard that Slack.
Thank you, Rob. Gwen, did you have a question?
I've got to run, y'all. We'll see you all. It's good to hear from everyone. Take care.
Great to see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
If folks don't have any other questions,
yes.
Maybe Chris and I will just kind of maybe close with it.
Gwen just popped up for one more question. Gwen,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Who?
Gwen, did you have a question?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one more.
Oh,
go ahead.
It's your
birthday.
I just wanted to say I thank you guys because that was very informative as well as detail that you gave us. As a matter of fact, I like the fact that you gave us even information on how we may be able to bring together people that we don't have at the table at this point. My question to you is, so do you guys travel to the different places to help talk to our foundation people?
Hello. More than willing to. AJ travels a lot because he's the national director of BAM, and BAM is all over the country and especially on the West Coast. But I'm open to traveling and doing some consultancy as long as travel arrangements are taken care of. I'm there, and yeah.
We're mid-sized. to Chicago.
And we're happy to partner virtually as well.
Yeah,
I got two lists here.
I'm glad you.
I'm going to say home.
The one thing I'll add is that I'm glad you raised this question, because this is actually something that we've thought about. We haven't sort of fully figured out how to do this yet, but we thought about, how can we take the next 2.0 version of this community learning and practice and say, instead of a webinar, like, we're going to put, Chris and AJ on a plane and go to a city where you could spend a day or two doing a deep dive, talking to the foundation community with us by everyone's side to really help you all do that. We haven't figured out how to do that. And just to be candid, that's probably a second half of next year kind of thing. But I think that's something we're definitely exploring and thinking about. Not just for the folks from Chicago, but other folks that have presented on this community of learning and practice as well. Really trying to figure out ways that we could start to spread the knowledge that we know that our folks have, and vice versa, spread that around.
Well, it'd be a wonderful birthday present. Thank you.
So I think the last thing I'll say for me, right? So it has been, and let me just be clear, right? Like, growing a program from when I came in, we were serving just around 2,000 students. We're now serving 8,000 in just a little under 4 or 5 years. Is a very particular kind of crazy that has been incredibly exciting, but has been, of course, fraught with a ton of challenges that we did not get into on this call. And so happy to get into those conversations as well. But I think the thing I'm most excited about is that we have learned so much from other people. We've learned so much from other organizations, from other geographies, about the work that they're doing, how much further ahead many geographies are, right, than Chicago might be on elevating this conversation, that people just understand, right, that kind of we're beginning to elevate, I think, as a city. And so I'm personally interested in learning more, right, from each of you in the work that you're doing, what it looks like in your communities, the challenges you're facing, because that can really, I continue to believe that helps me and our team think about kind of mental models and how we frame and think about this work. And I'll just turn over to Chris in terms of your thoughts on what's ahead for us here in Chicago.
Yeah. Once again, our action team is very young, but they're on fire. And I want to drill down on the point around how important it is to be intentional about building the community amongst that group. That's what creates that safe space. That's how we're able to have all these different entities with competing priorities at the same table, all around boys and young men of color. We have built a space where it's just a family village atmosphere, where we are authentic. We come to the space telling our authentic stories and what brings us to this work. So that's one lesson that I've learned along the way, even as a principal, that I wanted to incorporate into this, is building that sense of community. And while I've been on the role for about 4 months, it is incredibly challenging. And I think we all know that systems level work is challenging. Right now, the biggest challenge is like staying motivated in this space when you get a lot of no's. And I mean no's from the funding community. And how you have to cultivate the relationship to get major funding. And so that would probably be the biggest challenge right now. But, we're in it.
Yeah. So stay tuned, and we'll be looking to see the work you guys are doing in your communities as well. So, and BAM is in expansion growth mode. So if you think the programming is relevant for your geography, I'm happy to connect and have more discussions about what you guys are already doing and how BAM might be either a fit or not, right, for different geographies.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Chris and AJ, for joining us today. It looks like we're pretty much at time. I will be sure to share your contact information, also the recording and the slide deck presentation to everybody who's joined us, and also folks from across the network in the Slack community. And also we can connect offline to see if you all have any availability sometime, maybe early next week or later next week, to host office hours in the Slack community to answer any questions that folks weren't able to have answered during the call today. So as a reminder for everybody on the call, if you haven't already done so, please remember to create your OF directory profile and to send your first message in the Slack community. We do have some good news that our colleague Umu will be reaching out to folks over the course of the next couple of days. If you've had any trouble getting in the Slack community, we'll be happy to provide support and to answer any questions that you may have. And then finally, just a reminder, our next CLP call will be next Thursday, I believe, on school discipline for boys and young men of color with our friends at Policy Link and the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. So again, just thank you, Chris and AJ, for joining us today. Really excited to continue the conversation in the Slack community. And I'll be sure to make sure that all of those resources are disseminated there. Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody.